degrees, unless you're making like a 6-sided or 8-sided or something. But if it's a 4-sided box, the corners have to be 45 degrees. And if they're not 45 degrees, they're going to be open on the corners and not really fit well. The other thing is that the front and the back have to be the same length and the two ends have to be the same length. And so a number of years ago, I'd done some boxes for Alice Walton to give at Crystal Bridges. She wanted to give all of her first year employees a box. And so that was like 170 boxes. And then when, these were ordered by Alice, one of Alice's underlings, and so I made them. And then Alice saw them and she decided she wanted to give one to each of their first year volunteers. So it ended up somewhere in the several hundred boxes. But I'd specified they all have to be square. Because in cutting them square, I could just set up and I cut. Then I wondered afterwards, now how do you make a box that is rectangular instead of square? And so I came up with this simple thing. It's a little 2-inch block. And measure 2 inch each way, so I can, however I put it down there, it's going to be a 2-inch offset. And so you're all familiar with picture frame sizes. 5 by 7, it's a pleasing dimension. 8 by 10 is a pleasing dimension. They're all kind of standard. And they all have this same thing in common. This 2 inch or 2 foot, you know, I mean, it goes to rug sizing, 5 by 7, 9 by 11, 9.5 by 11.5 or something. It's all the pleasing rectangular form. So I use this little 2-inch block. And then I was real careful in measuring the angle of the blade to make sure that it was 45 degrees, because if it's not, that's going to throw everything off. So I'm going to make a little pencil line down here so I can easily remember how these pieces go together, just in case I set them aside in such a way that I don't keep straight what I'm doing. And I'm going to make my first cut, and I mark on my jig face side down and face side up. Face side meaning the outside of the box is what you want to be looking at. And I mark it on there. I don't mark that on my jig at home because I already know that stuff, but my students always need to be reminded. So I'm going to make my first cut, and it'll form a point. And it comes to a sharp point. And then I'm going to make a decision what size box I'm going to make. So I'm going to make it 8 by 6. So I'll mark on here. I'll make it 8 by 6. So I made an 8-inch mark. And I'll take this stop block over here and move it over to where I can see that the line is where the cut is made. And I can tell the cut's going to be there because it cut into the sled. This is called a sled. It's called a sled because it has 2 runners. And all it does is it carries the wood safely across the table saw and pulls it back safely so you can pick it up without having to reach close to the blade. So I put this stop block on. Now the stop block is important because it will make certain that the front and the back are exactly the same length. So I'm going to make this first. So I insert that in here, and so it fills out that space. So this is the same length as that. Back. And I take my pieces just exactly the way they were cut, one after the other. And I'm going to put tape in the corners so that you can see how they fit. And if I've done them right, all the joints will close up tight. And after practicing a lot, you don't do it wrong very often. You know, I mean, a friend of mine says if you want to be, and this applies to everything, if you want to be a good woodworker, do a lot of it. And that applies to everything you're going to do. If you want to be a good jeweler, plan to spend a lot of time at the bench. And even the simple things like cooking. Cooking is not a simple thing, by the way. And so this is cutting a miter is a fairly simple thing, but there are lots of things that can go wrong. What you do is you want to practice to get your techniques down until everything goes right. And so that's a box.
Good job.
I want to make a shameless plug. If any of you are interested in crafts, which many of you may be, I have my new book. It's called The Wisdom of Our Hands. Kelly has copies of this for sale. If you bring a copy by tomorrow, I will sign it for you. But The Wisdom of the Hands it's really about learning and growing and using your own growth to enhance the community in which you live. And so, the Talmud said that if a man does not teach his son a trade, he's abandoned him to become a robber instead. And so it used to be that crafts were kind of recognized as essential to civilization. And that was largely because people did so much handwork at that time that they knew very well the relationship between the use of their hands and the development of intelligence and character. And then we got into this abstract realm of the internet and the computer and all of that stuff, and you think you know it by watching YouTube. And so I was telling my students about the Dunning-Kruger effect. And Dunning and Kruger were sociologists, and they learned of a guy who decided he was going to rob a bank and get away with it because he knew that you could use lemon juice to make invisible ink. So he thought spreading lemon juice on his face would make him unrecognizable with security cameras, and of course it did not work. But the Dunning-Kruger effect was that people who know a little bit about something think they have in-depth knowledge of it, whereas that's not the case. And when you try to do something by hand, even if you've seen it in operation, seeing is not enough. You have to put your own hands in there and feel your own body and the movement of your own muscles and the weight of your own physiology in doing something, which then brings you fully present as much as a human being can be present in something. And you can think you've seen something and you're really smart now that you watch a YouTube video, but it's not exactly the same thing. That's why every school in the United States should be built around the formula that ESSA presents. Everyone goes and they create stuff. And in creating stuff, they in turn are creating themselves. So when you craft something, there's something much deeper going on than the little object that represents the time that you spent. So, anyway, thank you all for listening. Remember that your brains are in your hands. And